Thank you, Frank. As I said, that was a nice lead-in, Dan, the future being with the users. Before we get started, I'll just introduce the panel. On my right, your left, far end, Nizam. It's my own device. Okay. We'll try and get this in words and not in Morse. Nizam Uddin, who's the International Programmes Liaison Manager at the University of London Union. Mandy Phillips, Head of Biz at Liverpool John Moores University. Arthur Spirling, MBE, full title.
Very kind of you.
Who is the recently retired Director of ICT at Imperial College. And then Rob Churm, who's the Director of Information Services at St George's University of London. Now, I think there were some interesting points that were made. Frank has given us the challenge to come up with 5 top tips for your bring your own device strategy. In 45 minutes, that should be quite a challenge, particularly when we saw at Jan Martin's presentation how low the bring your own strategy was on the hypercurve. We also had a couple of points from Kallian from IBM that prediction is power, and yet Nick Skelton told us that actually universities don't know what students want. So to open things up, provided the technology stays sound, I'm going to invite Nizam to give us an idea of what students
should
want.
we try with the handhelds?
Yeah.
Can we switch those off? Just try this.
It's working.
Yeah, just speak and so on.
Hello, is it working? Oh, brilliant. Hi everybody, my name is Nizam. Firstly, I think I'm in the minority here to an extent in that I don't regard myself as being naturally gifted in the use of technology. I see them really as a means to an end, particularly in the learning environment, and I would argue the majority of students probably won't stray too far away from that sentiment. I should have a state, I still have an iPad and I covet my BlackBerry, so I am a product of this new generation. I very recently started my master's programme at King's College London, 2 weeks ago in fact. Knowing that I would be sitting on this panel, I kept a mental log of my IT experience during the entire process, and I came to some very interesting conclusions. I then correlated that with what I've been hearing the past few years when I've been a sabbatical officer in the Students' Union at SAWAS across the road, and then consequently as president of the University of London Union, just 2 roads down, so I'm straight too far. And I soon realised that things actually haven't changed that much apparently in the course of 4 years, or it's that students will always complain. And I suspect it's a bit of both, and it relates to student expectations, which is what this whole conference is about, and they have evolved proportionately with technological advancements, and they'll continue to rise in this ever-marketized climate. And the student voice is always going to be there, and it's going to increase. Now, interestingly, in my own experience, it started a month ago when I was about to start my course, and I started asking myself, what device do I need? And my mentality was I very much needed a device to supplement my learning and to help converge my experience from the classroom to my living room even. And this made me question why students brought in their own devices. And I went around and asked lots of friends, colleagues, and classmates. And a number of reasons were outlined. The first thing, the most common thing, was habit and comfort, which I think was alluded to a moment ago. In this era of Facebook, Twitter, iPads, iPods, Blackberries, majority of students are growing up with technology in the playground. And to the annoyance of many parents here, I'm sure even at the dinner table, they're bringing to class what they're used to using and what they're comfortable with. Second reason was inadequate facilities. Now this is quite controversial to an extent. Students are sometimes unhappy with the provision some universities provide. Now the interesting thing here is students from the same institution, in some instances, actually said they were happy and unhappy. And what it boils down to, again, is expectations. And from a student's own sense of what they should be receiving for the money that they are imparting onto the university, and through comparison of what competitive universities might be offering. And with fees increasing, pressures will rise to improve existing infrastructure from IT departments, as well as facilitating the bring your own device agenda. And then there's the third reason, which is the perception that you need a device. Now, muggins over here perhaps falls into that category. When a company like Apple tells me I need an iPad to improve my learning, my ears point up, they listen, and I go and buy it. I am a consumerist. I can't say anything else. Now, students bring a wide array of devices to universities, and they include laptops, tablets, netbooks, smartphones, so on and so forth. Now, all of these devices are used in some form as part of the student experience, be it to log on to the student email accounts, access virtual learning environments, downloading podcasts, searching for journals, etc. They all constitute a different challenge for IT departments in universities. Now, what do students expect from their university? How long is a piece of string? Generally, from experience, students want the following. They want general ease of access. They want Wi-Fi connectivity that is consistent, strong, and is easy to access. They want network access. They want accessible plug points with an emphasis on accessible, so not on the third floor where you're not going to go to otherwise. They want flexible spaces within which to operate mobile devices that seamlessly facilitate learning, particularly through bring your own device. And from my own experience, students definitely don't want multiple username and logins, which causes a lot of problems, which I've had in the last week. This is especially the case when general security advice would tell you your password has to differ for each account. You need to have one capital letter, you have numbers, and you forget, and you need, it's complicated business. Communication and information. Students, this is where a lot of institutions fail. Students want to know what's going on. They want to have information readily accessible. My own experience in last week has been calling a number that doesn't seem to get answered. And I've sent emails that doesn't elicit responses. Now, I understand it's the busy time of year, but I have just paid you £9,000. I don't care, you should know that this is going to happen and you should act accordingly. This is what students are feeling, certainly. Now, IT departments tend to be reactively student-facing, where students only see members of IT when problems arise. Now, this is a culture that needs to be changed. The perception needs to change through better communication, and an idea might be through better public partnerships with active groups on campus, such as the Students' Union. Now, also advice. Students want advice. Which device is the best to use? Now, with the amount of choice out there, it's easy to get confused. It'd be very interesting if institutions compiled a list of the best, most compatible devices that were suitable to their IT and learning environment infrastructure, particularly at the point of admissions, where students are thinking about what investment to make in terms of their studies. A good example is the fact that I have an iPad. My virtual learning environment uses Flash. I can't access it, so I go home on a computer and I have to access it that way. To conclude, I think a bring your own device strategy needs to incorporate a more dynamic and fluid relationship with the end user, which has been a consistent theme from what I've heard so far, essentially meaning communicating with them. Communicating is by far also the best method of managing expectations. A good example of this is something which is going to be talked about later on in the afternoon, which is through student charters. And I promised Emily from the NUS, I wouldn't go into too much detail into that, so I'll let that be. There also needs to be a balance struck between facilitating and promoting the bring your own device agenda. The priority, in my opinion, should be basic infrastructure in the first instance, particularly as with fees set to be so high. I doubt students are going to be able to afford their own device as of next year, and students would want the facilities on campus to be of the highest quality. I think that needs to be the priority. There's also a schism between administrators and academics. The learning environment is only as good as the academics that teach it. And from my own experience, even with virtual learning environments, some academics don't promote it as much as others. They don't participate. Therefore, students don't use it. If you're going to bring your own device, academics need to be okay with that agenda and need to be promoting it. I hope that is...
Thank you. Thanks, Nizam. I think a number of points there. Rob, do you want to actually take the mic and respond to the certainly expectation side and how things are managed at St George's?
Okay. I don't know if it's me. I've worked in a few higher education institutions during my 20-year career, and I would say in all those institutions we've always had good relationships actually with the students. The students have actually been part of the actual decision-making process and clearly put their own requirements actually forward. Myself, I've just developed a new information strategy. I followed the GIST toolkit. We got the key stakeholders together, which includes significant representation actually from the student body. They were very clear that they wanted a pervasive Wi-Fi network actually across the campus. They were very clear that in terms of the library, they thought that the library facilities needed to actually be refurbished, make that space much more technology enabled than it actually is at the moment. In terms of student fees, I think this is where we need to get an understanding actually with our students. As we all know, the £9,000 fees are coming, but 80% of that fee is merely going to replace funding which we've actually lost. At least another 10% of that fee that is actually prescribed how we should actually spend that particular income coming into the institution, which leaves approximately 10% overall to actually improve the student experience across the board. And I'm not sure that an institution actually going out and buying tablets for all its students would be the best approach for actually spending that particular additional amount. Which leads to we have to have a bring your own device strategy, and very much at St George's we do. We cater for Wi-Fi access using Edge Your Own, and I would guess that a lot of people in the room also do that. We also employ something called Bradford Campus Manager, and I'm not sure how well taken that is up in this country. But what that effectively does is it allows somebody to bring their own device actually onto campus, actually to plug in that device into the network. Certain policy conditions will then be checked on that device in terms of whether its operating system is up to date, whether it's been virus checked, and it eventually leads you to a page where you can actually authenticate using your George's details, your George's credentials, or you can actually then self-register through Bradford Campus. Depending on whether you are a student, staff member or a guest, you will then get a different set of policies actually applied to that device. Okay.
Okay, so you've got to bring your own device policy. The question we'll maybe throw out related to that, and I know Arthur's got a reply already, is so is the student lab, PC lab dead?
Can I have a go?
Yeah.
Thanks. I find it really rather odd this. I find it really rather odd this debate about just because the students are paying 9k, we ought to provide them with a good service. We should have been providing them with a good service way before they had to pay 9k. We should have been providing them with, as we have at Imperial, he said, and bang bang, for the past 47 years. Yes, I've been in IT for 47 years, way before mobile devices and whatever. And in reply to the speaker on my right, of course they must bring their own devices. Why would we say no? Of course they only want one login name and password. Why do you want half a dozen or 10? Of course you want to see ICT people. My help desk has an open door policy. From 8 o'clock in the morning, not too many students coming at that time, to 6 o'clock in the evening, a few more turn up then. And of course students should be consulted in all cases. Every one of my senior IT governance committees, including the one that runs the security governance, has a student on it, a bit like the speaker on my left. To have a governance set up with no students on strikes me as utterly mad. But that said, you can't have anarchy. So what I'd like to suggest we have at Imperial is a framework of governance whereby people can bring in their mobiles, but they are required to log on with their one login name and password. They can do it as easily as my colleague on the left said. But we do, and I notice in the blogs about this particular session, still have, well, the blogger said barns full of PCs. No, we don't have barns full, we have buyers full. They're a bit smaller. They're sort of 50 PCs at a time. And they're very, very popular. Now we, each year, ask the students what they want. And interestingly, what they wanted more of in their answers to the last questionnaire was more PCs in these buyers. They want more PCs in the library. They simply want more. So we're debating internally, why is this? They all come in with their mobiles, they all come in with their handhelds, yet still they want more of these static devices. Now one reason might be, of course, licensing. It's a shame, or perhaps there is, I can't remember, whether there's a session on software licensing. I get particularly irked when I say to the software licenser who wants to offer me a good deal for Imperial College, oh, and so can this be used on the students' mobiles? Oh, no, sir. No, our licenses don't permit that. That has got to change. We've got to put pressure on the license suppliers. MATLAB have moved, why don't the rest? So a number of our people have to use commercial software and therefore have to use static PCs. Shall I stop there?
Thank you. And actually, one of the points there, I mean, yes, there's still need for static devices, but yes, students are bringing their own devices, but we don't necessarily know how they're used. Mandy, you've done some work on this.
Yeah, we did a recent survey at Liverpool John Moores, which was all about IT needs, which is, of course, quite a broad subject area. And we found from that survey that 93% of our students have laptops, have or own, have access to laptops, that 49% have iPhones or smartphones with a data package, and 75% have smartphones without. So, but the task that I was given when I arrived at John Moores 2 years ago was to stick another 100 PCs in one of the LRCs, because the biggest student complaint is we don't have enough PCs in the buildings. We have 3,500 open access PCs across the institution, but we have 25,000 students. We are never going to have enough student PCs to satisfy everybody. And I think the conclusion that we're coming to in the work that we're doing in terms of our IT needs is that it's all about choice. It's about how people want to work and making it easy for them to do that in whatever way they want to. So the student wants to know that it works, they want to know that it's easy, that there isn't multiple passwords, but they also want to know that it's not intrusive, because one of the big cautions I have about the whole bring your own device agenda is that when we start asking students and staff to bring their own devices, then we're mixing the personal and the learning and the corporate, and that has implications that we need to communicate to our student body. We need to engage our student body and make them aware that when they're using their mobile devices with the wireless networks and with the Janet networks, that there are implications of that, and at this current point in time I don't feel that that's being really thought about.
Thank you. I'm going to throw it open now. We've got quite a few questions that have come through, or points that have been put through on the blog, but I'm quite willing to, keen to engage the audience here. So we have some roving mics. These are the roving mics. Okay. We have one roving mic. And so, any questions from the floor? This gentleman up there on the left. Let's see. Hugh.
Thank you very much, Peter. Hugh Lavery, Leeds Mat. I think the challenge we may have with BYOD is CBA. The students can't be bothered to bring them. Both my children at university, both have laptops, both can't be bothered. So it's how do we motivate them? Because what we don't do is spend a lot of money on infrastructure that could be used elsewhere for the student experience.
I agree. I think when we talked to the students about why 93% of them had devices that they weren't bringing, they said that they didn't want to carry them, that we live in a city centre environment and there were security issues. This got nothing to do with technology, it's about how we do it. But they also said, well, we want to print and we want access to our network files. And we said, well, you can do that. And they said, can we? So then we realised there was a big, debate about communication to be had in terms of these fantastic services that we've got that we're not communicating very well to our student base. And I think that's part of this is a big marketing campaign and engaging the Students' Union to actually tell everybody about what it is that we're doing.
I would have to agree completely. I think it is very much a case of non-IT related issues, especially when you are in the centre of a city. So most of the London-based universities have those problems. I mean, walking around with an iPad, if it's too obvious, then I mean, how is that going to be helpful? But I think fundamentally is the communication issue. I think a lot of universities already have excellent facilities available for IT infrastructure, and I think going back to the point I raised earlier, I think having an open door policy to meet IT staff is great, but who's going to go there? Will they be bothered to go up to the first or second floor to meet the IT team? They'll only go up there when they have an issue with their IT. And the point I was trying to raise was, I think, proactively, like library services, for example, they'll be in your face during induction. If the IT guys are out there saying, this is what we do, please know about it, I think it would make life a hell of a lot easier.
Okay, so you want to?
Yeah, we'll come back on that. But we have centralised IT support, but I have a team of people in every building at Imperial College, only a tiny team, 2 or 3 people. They have an open door policy, not just in our central help desk. So our people are readily accessible. And also to pick up your point, we're absolutely right about communication. We have a very extensive FAQ, so students can learn once they've got their mobile working, but even before they've got their mobile working, because it's on the public web, what to do to get connected.
Okay, I'm still trying to come to terms with the concept of the in-your-face librarian. So, next question then.
I just meant maybe have a broader question. It's not just bring your own device, and it's not just for students. It's also about staff also need to integrate their own needs, and it's not just a device. In my experience at working at the university, it was difficult to just set up a conference website. It was very difficult to get anything that roll out a faculty blog and things. So it isn't just whereas you can go on WordPress.com and have that in seconds. But it's difficult to integrate these things across. So it isn't necessarily just the students who have the problems. It's the staff, it's the whole kind of environment that sort of encourages you to bring your own laptop, buy your own copy of Word, but it isn't really just encouraging people to bring in their own experiences and bring their own networks as well.
As I mentioned, bring your own device. Bradford Campus Manager doesn't distinguish when you plug it in whether you are actually a staff member or a student. It's only when you authenticate we actually get those details. In terms of providing a full service, SharePoint, desktop conferencing facilities, it is very much about advocacy and the actual computing services department advertising the services which are actually available, doing show and tell sessions, getting people actually into the IT department to appreciate that these devices which are actually provided don't just arrive and sit on the desk and that cable which goes in the wall just runs somewhere. So they do actually understand the total complexity of what we're actually delivering. I know from time to time in my own institution I come up with security issues around things like Dropbox and the need for public key infrastructure, and have a look at Lockbox if you're looking for a solution at the moment. But again, it's very much about gathering the requirements and making sure that we actually prioritise those requirements and feed back to users the requirements which we can support, because we don't have endless funding to actually provide everything, and it's very important that when you do prioritise, you do communicate what you can deliver in each financial year, and it's important each year to review that and make sure it actually goes through the funding cycle.
Just to pick up on the staff point, I'm interested in that because I think some of the articles around this read about the enhanced productivity of staff where there are bring your own devices. So if you've got a BlackBerry, you might be constantly checking emails or, you know, checking in at 11 o'clock at night and picking up on things, whereas maybe you wouldn't have done previously. And we are supposed to be preparing our students to go out into a workplace where this technology is all around us, and if we're not encouraging them and encouraging our staff to take advantage of it, how are we preparing them to do that? But also from a security and a control perspective, if we don't allow staff to be creative and to use them in a way that they want to without being so threatening in terms of the network protocols and everything else that we need to put in place, then we'll be throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and that's something that we need to be aware of.
Just related to that is the notion of for example, a good example is I authored a student submission for the University of London for the distance learning programme, and one issue we faced was the Moodle was fantastic, the virtual learning environment is great, it's up there, every student, we have 50,000 students around the world in over 190 countries, they all have access to it, they all have their own devices, I'm sure, they use it, they got on there, there's nothing there, because certain academics don't utilise it. That may be because of staff training, that may be because of the culture of the way they learn and how to study. They have very different notions of how to study and research. And I'd be intrigued as to what the panelists do currently to try and facilitate from their own academics on their own campuses how to bring them in and reconcile that gap which currently exists, in my opinion, from my own experiences.
Nobody wants to take that on.
I think it's a very good point. I think we're talking about, you know, a bring your own device strategy. I don't think we need a strategy for people bringing their own devices. They're doing it already. What I think we need to do is look at this as a wider institutional agenda of what kind of content are we writing? How is that being delivered to all of these different devices, whether it's laptop, mobile, etc., etc. And that part of the information strategy of the future is looking at something that's device agnostic, that's operating system agnostic, so that it gets delivered, but links into the teaching and learning strategies to allow our academics to give them the support they need to keep ahead of the game, which is extremely difficult to do.
Thanks. I'd just like to pick up on the issue of security, because there is inevitably a tension between those of us who run the computing services who do need to think about security, and our academic colleagues who would rather not like to think about security. And why should they? And we have to be very careful not to impose such a security that the academic colleagues can't do what they want. But that's why, if I can just go on about governance again, my Security Governance Committee consists of the third, what I call functionaries, and I'm a functionary, I run the IT service, and 2/3 academics, plus a student representative. So I present to them those security things I need to introduce, and they say to me, well, that'll stop me doing this, that'll stop me doing that. Therefore I rethink. It's not as dark as that, because I think first and then present a policy, but I do end up with a security policy that satisfies my institution and also satisfy the academics in all the new and novel things they want to do. But you can only achieve that by transparent governance. Oh, just one more thing, sorry. I had a battle with my security people on Skype. Skype is such a useful thing. But my security people, first of all, said, oh, no, you can't have Skype. There might be a node set up in the college and that would do this, that and the other. I said, I'm terribly sorry, I want Skype. I want to talk to my son in America, work out how to do it. So that's how you follow it. You know, if that's what you want to do, make the security people come up with an idea as to how to do it safely. Not just say, no, you can't do it.
I'd just like to say I had exactly the same battle around Skype. So obviously this is a keen one. I think I'd just like to agree with Arthur. It is very much about negotiating these policies so people can actually undertake their roles actually in the institution, and that you're not actually stopping them from developing, being innovative, etc. And I too have regular communication with the academic colleagues who question sometimes, you know, why can't I do this? We talk about it, and there are amendments actually made to policies to actually enable them to do the activities as long as we can enable them. Okay.
So take another one.
I'm wondering how the panel feels about BYOD, bring your own device bias. We can probably name the tablet computer that everybody is holding in this room about 98% accuracy. Is there a case to be made for a college concentrating its limited resources or policy apparatus on catering to that device, given that most of the population has one? Or do you think that agnostic is always the rule?
I'll actually, that's a great question. I'll actually throw something else into the mix in that you know, whether this is something that institutions need to do proactively to get over. Somebody mentioned, I think Martin King mentioned the element in the room being equality. You know, not all the students will be able to afford a device. How do we ensure that they're engaged too? And if that then drives a single device strategy. I'll throw it.
Well, I'll try and I'll start. We're absolutely agnostic. I happen to have an Android device, so I'm one of the 20%. Sorry about that. We've run for a long time a policy that if somebody wants a Mac, they have a Mac. If somebody wants Microsoft, they have Microsoft. If somebody wants Linux, they have Linux. If somebody wants a different sort of Linux, they have a different sort of Linux. But where you get to, let's just stick with the Linux bit. If they want a different Linux to the one I'm actually supporting, is there a bit more on their own? So one of the things that I was musing about with this is bring your own device, is are they bringing their own device by the invitation of the organisation, i.e. you're welcome to use it if you can, or are they bringing their own device by instruction, i.e. we want to do away with these barnfuls of PCs that we look after, and instead students and the staff will bring their own device. If you get to that latter stage, I think in order to be able to sustain the support costs, you'll probably have to hone down on only one or two devices. You couldn't possibly hope to support the huge myriad of devices that are out there now. And what about the $35 Indian computer that they're just launching? We have a whole load of Indian students. I'm sure they'll be given these things by their mums and dads before they leave. Are we to support those as well? So I think it depends whether you're inviting the people to bring them or instructing them to bring them.
I think I'd just like to say that solutions to date have been mainly device agnostic. We took the Oxford Molly actual product and then converted that to be St George's Molly. We equally have mobile Moodle, which I'm sure quite a lot of you have already. However, recently there has been a move actually in the e-learning unit. We're working quite closely actually with Apple, and Apple have given us a number of pads on loan, free, and we're looking at how we can actually incorporate those pads actually into the learning experience and how they would actually affect the pedagogy. And we're really just doing a pilot at the moment, but we've developed an app for virtual patients. Virtual patients is a technology which is around decision trees. I don't know if you ever remember playing the Hobbit game many moons ago, but sort of asking questions of the patients, getting responses, then taking a decision, moving on, corrective movements, etc. That seems to be very popular. We've just pushed that a little bit further and decided that we're actually going to look to see if we could actually write an app to actually create a virtual patients. So actually having the development tool actually as a mobile app as well, so the academics while they're travelling around, etc., can actually capture their thoughts immediately into this type of technology.
Okay, just before I take that question, I'm just going to take one from the Twitter feed and from the blog here. one of the points that was made was that it sometimes feels like IT departments say no too easily. We're all familiar with the sort of Little Britain, computer says no experience, and it sometimes sort of applies to the IT department as a whole. I mean, is there maybe a cultural challenge here within IT departments to become more enabling? I want to throw that your way.
I think there is, and I think to some degree that is happening. There is always the challenge, and there's always tensions within a university about what students want, what staff want, and what they can actually get within the resource allocation that they've got. I think, from my point of view, it's about sitting down, it's the negotiation, it's the consultation, and about the priorities for moving things forward based on the institution's needs.
I think I've said it before, but I run an organisation that likes to say yes. I do know there are some IT organisations that don't, but mine does, and it will carry on saying yes, even though I've left, because my successor likes to say yes too.
I think I would also say, to me, it's very much about the engagement. We will always try to say yes. We'll always try to work with our users. We do have a help desk. I operate an open door policy. I have sabbaticals drop in regularly. Come and see me. I'm quite happy to talk about any issue with them.
Okay. Do you want to come back?
Oh, no,
No, you don't. Okay.
I'm interested that nobody seems to have mentioned a particular group of students that we care about very much at the University of Leicester, which are the distance learners. Because they're 40% of our students, in fact, and they don't bring their devices to campus because they don't come to campus, but they do use their own devices, and we're trying to think of ways of providing for them as near an equivalent experience as our campus learners, and that is probably going to mean the virtual desktop and the sort of delivery of the rich variety of applications that you can get on campus through that other medium, and I wondered if anybody else is trying to tackle that challenge.
We're not.
And I think the approach we take at John Moores is that we treat all of our students the same, in that if they're a nursing student coming off placement at 2 in the morning, or they're based in Malta doing some distance learning course, they should have an equity of experience. And what we try and do is deliver services that will work for all of those. So that's the starting point that we take, is not to deliver to a group of students with a device, but to step back from that and say, let's deliver a service that works for everybody, which is not always achievable, but it's a nice starting point.
I was going to say, throughout the last year I've been working primarily with distance learning students now. Whilst I can't comment on the technological aspects, from their own expectations, I think students, it's difficult because the University of London in particular has enshrined in its mission statement access, and up until recently there was no caveat for the level of internet connection that you needed to have before you enrolled as a student. They do now, which means I think expectations are going to increase. But I think fundamentally what students want is the ability to, and for me this is the thing which is difficult for me to get around. In terms of trying to replicate an experience which is akin to that of being on campus, are we talking about an academic experience, or are we talking of the social experience? Because I, working for the union at the moment, have been working to try and create the latter. I think the academic experience is, just by virtue of them having enrolled into a program, that should be the default experience that they have. But I think universities should also consider what they can do to try and improve the additional experiences in terms of being an all-rounded graduate, which they may miss out on having opted to study through distance learning, which may be due to a number of reasons. I think in the UK, going forward in the next few years, we're going to see a jump in distance learners because it is a lot more cost-effective than coming onto campus. And then I think the moment that happens, you're going to have a lot of questions being raised about students in the UK who could actually visit you by virtue of them living in the same city, and then potentially posing more pressures that way.
I suddenly remembered we do have distance learners, but they're not distance learners in the accepted sense of the word. They never come to college. They're our medics. When our medics go out and do their 6 weeks away, in such remote places as Yeovil, and that's pretty remote, they still have the bulk of the resources that they could get if they were on either the South Kent campus or the other 6 medical campuses. So I guess they are distance learners. I just never thought of them like that.
If you've read my profile, you'll have seen that for the last 9 months I've actually been involved in setting up a medical school in Nicosia, Cyprus. That medical school opened 2 weeks ago, and again the students there have access to all the same resources.
Okay. We've got time for one last question down there.
It's me, Jeff Bouch, Plymouth University. I'd just like to follow up from Mary from Leicester's point. This is a sort of challenge really. I think we need to challenge the likes of Janet, EduServe and all of the software vendors to deliver the technology and licensing which lets us do virtualization as a sort of national grid service effectively, and that would really support the bring your own device significantly.
I fully agree. Yes, absolutely.
Yep. We're all in violent agreement here, which is a good, yes, rather worrying. Good point probably to end on. I think probably there's been a number of key themes that have emerged, and perhaps the challenge we was set at the start to get top 5 tips for your bring your own device strategy. The first message is probably don't write one, but really that the needs of students bringing their own device needs to be embedded in a whole load of other strategies, in your teaching and learning strategy, and the way that you engage with students, in your estate strategy, making space available for students to use as group work informally later, and a whole host of other strategies besides. There are clearly some key things to do. One of the underlying themes I think has been governance, and the way that changes are introduced and managed within the institution, and part of that is engagement with the student body and really listening to what their needs are. And again, a link to that is really moving to becoming or reinforcing and communicating that you are an engaging, enabling IT department. With that, I think I'd like to conclude and thank my panel members, and thank you for taking part in the discussion. Thanks.
Many thanks to Nizam.